Before you dive in, brace yourself, because this story begins with a scream heard across a quiet American street, a scream that made every customer in the shop freeze. And when they turned to look, no one expected to see a man who'd survived heartbreak, betrayal, and years of raising a daughter alone, calmly silencing another woman with a kiss that would change everything. If you love shocking twists, messy emotions, powerful single dad redemption arcs, and stories that hit like a Netflix drama, hit follow right now, because you're about to read something wild. Ethan Cole never intended to become the center of a public scandal on a sleepy Wednesday afternoon, but fate had always enjoyed twisting his life into sharp turns, and that day was no different as he rearranged the display of hand-carved wooden toys in his small repair and restoration shop on the corner of Maple Street, a shop that smelled of pine dust and lemon oil, a shop that had kept him alive after his ex-wife, Miranda, tore their marriage apart 3 years earlier and left him with full custody of their daughter, Lily. He was wiping down the counter, humming the same soft tune Lily loved, when the bell above the door jingled and in stepped a woman with dark auburn hair, a camera slung over her shoulder, and eyes sharp enough to slice through silence, the kind of woman who walked in like the world belonged to her, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest even before she spoke, introducing herself as Harper Lane, a traveling documentary photographer who had been told that the single dad craftsman on Maple Street created miracles out of broken things, and Ethan chuckled awkwardly because no one had described him with any kind of poetic praise in a long time. But Harper's voice was soft and curious as she explained she was researching local tradespeople for an Americana series that would be published in both the United States and the United Kingdom, and she'd heard his story carried something deeper under the surface, a mix of heartbreak, talent, and quiet resilience. Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or hide, but he agreed to let her photograph the workshop as long as Lily wasn't disturbed, and Harper promised she loved kids and respected boundaries. Though Ethan knew promises were just wind and less proven, still something about her steadiness, her calm, almost gentle spirit, made him trust her more than he expected to trust a stranger. Harper wandered around the shop snapping photos of delicate rocking horses, tiny hand-painted soldiers, intricate dollhouse furniture, and Ethan himself as he worked, her lens capturing moments he didn't realize were meaningful until he saw her face soften while watching him work, her expression saying more than she ever could with words, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt seen, not as a divorced man, not as a single father drowning in bills, not as a man who suffered betrayal, but as someone worth observing. They were talking about childhood memories and Harper's life on the road when a piercing scream sliced through the air like a knife, a scream that shook the shelves and made Harper drop her camera as Ethan's shoulders stiffened instantly because he recognized that voice even before he turned. Miranda, his ex-wife, stood outside the shop window, her blonde hair wild, mascara streaked down her cheeks, pointing toward the shop as if it were the scene of a crime, and customers outside the bakery across the street turned to stare. Ethan's jaw tightened as Harper asked if they should call someone, but he shook his head because Miranda had always been dramatic, always been volatile, always been capable of creating chaos out of calm, and he stepped toward the door only for it to slam open before he reached it, Miranda storming inside like a hurricane, screaming accusations about him ignoring her calls, about him ruining her life, about him being ungrateful for everything she had ever done. Though Ethan couldn't think of a single good thing she'd done since the divorce that wasn't motivated by control, and Harper stepped back in confusion, clearly unsure if she should intervene or leave. Miranda then noticed Harper, her expression twisting with a venomous smirk as she spat, Of course there's another woman. You move on the moment I turn my back. You always were pathetic, Ethan, so easily manipulated," and Ethan clenched his fists, trying to stay calm for Lily's sake. Though Lily wasn't there, she was at school, but Miranda never cared about timing. Harper tried to explain she was only a photographer working on a project, but Miranda leaned in close, invading her space, hissing that she wasn't fooled, that women like her always chased men like Ethan, for pity or for fun, and Ethan moved between them, telling Miranda firmly to leave, but she only screamed louder, "So you can kiss her behind my back? Is that it? You're cheating again." Though Ethan had never cheated in his entire life, and Harper looked appalled by the accusation, customers gathered outside watching through the window, the drama turning into a spectacle, and Miranda's voice echoed off the wooden beams until suddenly Harper tripped backward over a stool, falling into Ethan's arms, and the movement brought them so close their foreheads nearly touched, Harper's breath shaking with shock and humiliation as Ethan steadied her, telling her softly it was all right, that Miranda wasn't her problem, and Miranda shrieked even louder at the sight of them inches apart, calling Harper names, calling Ethan unreliable, calling their entire moment disgusting, and Ethan, exhausted, humiliated, furious, acted without thinking. He turned to Harper, cupped her face gently, and pressed his lips to hers, not out of romance or desperation, but to drown out Miranda's venom, to end the public humiliation, to reclaim control of his own story, and Harper froze for half a second before slowly kissing him back, the shop falling into a stunned silence as if the world itself held its breath. Miranda's scream died instantly, her mouth hanging open in shock, the customers outside staring wide-eyed, Harper trembling lightly against Ethan as the kiss broke, her cheeks flushed, Ethan breathing heavily because he couldn't explain why he'd done it except that it felt like the only way to shut down the chaos that had been poisoning his life for far too long, and Harper's hand lingered on his chest as she whispered, "Ethan, what was that?" But before he could answer, Miranda bolted out the door, her heels clacking down the sidewalk as she yelled into her phone, threatening lawyers, custody battles, revenge, destruction, anything she could think of to cause more pain, and Ethan felt the weight return to his shoulders as Harper swallowed hard, staring at him with 1,000 questions behind her eyes, questions he wasn't ready to answer, questions he didn't know how to answer. But the kiss had already changed everything, and as the shop returned to its quiet hum, Ethan realized he had crossed a threshold he could never step back from, a line drawn not with anger but with desperation, and now both he and Harper were entangled in a storm he never intended to drag her into, a storm that would only get darker from there. Harper hadn't planned for her day to transform from a simple photography assignment into a messy entanglement with a man whose past was louder than the scream that had shaken the street, yet as she sat on the wooden stool inside Ethan's workshop after Miranda fled, her breath still unsteady and her heart pounding with leftover adrenaline, and something else she didn't want to name yet. She realized she wasn't ready to leave either, not with the way Ethan stood in front of her, rubbing his temples, apologizing repeatedly for dragging her into his personal tornado, and Harper, trying to act unaffected even though her lips still tingled from the unexpected kiss, told him softly that she wasn't fragile, that she had handled conflict zones, foreign protests, and packed subway stations in London at rush hour, so one angry ex-wife wasn't going to send her running. Ethan gave a tired laugh, the kind that came from years of holding himself together with nothing but patience and parental responsibility, and when Harper asked if Miranda had always been like that, his expression faltered, shadows passing through his eyes as he explained that their marriage had been built on convenience rather than love, that Miranda came from money and saw Ethan as a project, a hobby she could shape. But once Lily was born, and Ethan chose to be the primary caregiver while Miranda chased status, their relationship cracked until the only thing left was resentment on her side and disappointment on his, and Harper listened, watching him speak with a raw honesty she wasn't used to photographing. This wasn't a story about crafts, it was a story about survival. Before Ethan could continue, the door chimed again and in walked Officer Damien Holt, the local policeman, tall, broad-shouldered, and unmistakably concerned as he asked if everything was all right because calls had already come in from the bakery and hardware store reporting yelling and domestic distress, and Ethan sighed, giving Damien the short version, though he left out the kiss. Harper noticed the way Damien's eyes flicked between them, sharp and assessing, and she wondered if he picked up on the strange tension lingering like electricity between her and Ethan. Damien warned Ethan that Miranda had run straight toward the courthouse district, never a good sign, and that Ethan should be prepared for whatever papers she might try to file, though they both knew Miranda had lost custody for a reason and the court wouldn't easily bend, but still, her threats always stirred fear in Ethan, the kind of fear only a parent understood, the fear of losing the one thing that mattered. When Damien left, Harper felt an impulse rising in her chest, a crazy, reckless impulse driven by the spark still glowing inside her from that kiss, and she suggested that maybe they should take a break from the shop, clear their heads, maybe get Lily from school together so the girl wasn't surprised by whatever Miranda had done or said, and Ethan hesitated because he didn't want to drag Harper deeper, yet something in her expression, steady, calm, unjudging, made him nod. They walked side by side toward the elementary school, their steps falling into sync like two people who'd known each other longer than a day, and on the way Harper asked questions that weren't journalistic. They were personal, intimate, like what Ethan wanted for his future, what dreams he had buried due to responsibility, what he missed about his old self, and Ethan found himself answering honestly, telling her about how he once wanted to open a large workshop that taught woodworking to kids, how he wanted Lily to grow up knowing creativity wasn't a weakness but a strength, how he wanted to be the kind of father who healed the wounds his own father never did. Harper listened closely, her heart warming at each word, and she shared bits of her own life too. How photography saved her after losing her brother, how travel gave her purpose but also loneliness, how sometimes she wished she had a place to return to, a place that felt like home. By the time they reached the school gate, an unspoken softness had formed between them, not love, not yet, but a kind of trust that came from shared vulnerability. Lily, cheerful and bright-eyed, ran to Ethan with her usual excitement, and when she noticed Harper, she shyly asked if she was the camera lady, and Harper knelt to greet her, showing Lily how her camera worked, even letting the girl take a picture of her dad making a goofy face. The moment so wholesome, Ethan found himself smiling in a way he hadn't smiled in years. But the peace was short-lived. As they walked back toward the shop, a black luxury car pulled up beside them and Miranda stepped out looking eerily composed, mascara fixed, hair brushed, voice suddenly smooth as she knelt to Lily and said she had a surprise for her at a new house she had rented, that Lily should come spend the night, that Mommy missed her, and Ethan's body tensed immediately because Miranda never asked politely unless she wanted something sinister, and Lily, sensing the tension, clung to Ethan's shirt, whispering she didn't want to go. Harper noticed the shift instantly, stepping slightly closer in silent support. Miranda's polite smile cracked as Ethan refused, telling her she needed to schedule visits through the court, but Miranda's voice grew sharp again, accusing him of turning Lily against her, accusing Harper of replacing her, accusing everyone but herself for why the little girl looked afraid. Before the scene could escalate, the car door opened again and out stepped a tall, well-dressed man in an expensive suit, Julian Rhodes, Miranda's new fiancé, a wealthy tech investor with a cold smile and eyes that scanned Harper dismissively before landing on Ethan with calculated superiority. Julian told Ethan that Miranda had spoken to him about options for revising custody, and that they were prepared to take legal action, adding with a smirk that Ethan's small wooden toy shop income wouldn't stand a chance against their resources, and Harper felt anger flare inside her because she had seen men like Julian all over the world. Men who believed money meant moral superiority, men who thought they could take whatever they wanted because they could pay for the consequences to vanish. Ethan, voice steady but trembling underneath, told Julian he wasn't afraid of bullies, but Julian only laughed, telling Ethan that he looked awfully cozy with Harper today and that a judge might find it inappropriate for Lily to be exposed to unstable, impulsive romantic entanglements, alluding to the kiss, meaning Miranda must have filmed it on her phone or at least described it in a way that would be twisted beyond truth. Harper's heart dropped, realizing that her presence had become ammunition in Miranda and Julian's strategy, and Ethan's face paled as Lily started to cry, overwhelmed by the tension. Miranda stepped forward to comfort Lily, but the girl flinched, and Harper instinctively stepped between them, gently telling Miranda to stop scaring her child, which made Julian's expression harden as if Harper had stepped into a battlefield she didn't understand. Miranda snapped that Harper had no right to interfere, but before the screaming started again, Officer Damien appeared once more, this time intentionally, standing beside Ethan with a presence so solid the air shifted, and he calmly informed Miranda that any attempt to take Lily without proper authorization would result in immediate consequences, as he had already filed a report of her earlier disturbance. Julian tried to argue, but Damien cut him off with legal clarity, and Miranda, furious but trapped by reality, ordered Julian back into the car. As she left, she hissed at Ethan that, "This isn't over," her eyes flicking toward Harper with a look of hatred so sharp Harper felt it like a blade. When the car finally disappeared, Ethan let out a breath so heavy it almost folded him, and Harper placed a hand on his arm, telling him he wasn't alone in this, not anymore, and Ethan looked at her with an emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years, hope. But hope was dangerous, and he knew it, yet as they walked Lily home, Harper still beside him, the sunset painting the sky in soft gold, Ethan couldn't shake the truth settling inside him like a slow-burning ember. Miranda wasn't lying about one thing: this wasn't over. It was only beginning. That night, after the confrontation with Miranda and Julian, Ethan sat with Lily asleep on his lap while Harper quietly brewed tea in the small kitchen of the shop, the soft lamplight making the space feel safer than it had all day. And when she sat beside him, he finally confessed that the kiss had terrified him, not because it was wrong, but because it felt too right, too honest, too awakening for a man who'd locked away his heart for years. Harper admitted she felt it too, that she didn't regret it, that she'd never kissed someone out of instinct and found clarity instead of confusion, and before they could untangle those new feelings, a knock shook the shop door as Officer Damien stepped in with unexpected news. Miranda had already tried to file for emergency custody, but the footage from the bakery camera, not of the kiss but of Miranda's own erratic behavior earlier, had been submitted by witnesses, proving she escalated the situation, meaning the judge dismissed her request within minutes. Ethan's relief was so strong he nearly collapsed, and Harper steadied him, laughing as tears slipped down his cheeks. Damien added one final twist. Julian had been caught yelling at Miranda in the courthouse parking lot, their engagement seemingly shattered over her recklessness, leaving her alone and spiraling. The storm had cracked itself from the inside. When Damien left, Harper whispered that Ethan didn't have to face anything alone anymore, and in the quiet that followed, Ethan kissed her again, slow this time, intentional, warm, not to silence chaos but to welcome peace. Lily woke up just long enough to see them and sleepily ask if Harper was staying for breakfast tomorrow, and Harper smiled, promising yes. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like the world didn't owe him pain, it owed him healing. And as the night settled around them, the single dad, the photographer, and the little girl who loved wooden toys finally stepped into a new beginning, one built not from desperation, but from choice, courage, and the unexpected kiss that changed everything.